Hello everybody, today I'm going to talk about the publishing the web service right way, and I will have multiple scenarios and we'll go through each scenario. We'll start with the scenario 1, and you can see that I have here the DMZ server located on the DMZ subnet, which is located on the DMZ zone on the firewall, and we have 3 services on this DMZ server. One of the services published to the internet, that is front-end service. When the user comes from the internet, they'll reach the front-end service, and then the front-end service will talk with the application service, and the application service, which is the logic service, will talk to the database service here. This is okay for the internal projects, for labs, but you cannot have this scenario and publish the web service to the internet because it's not safe. Let me explain why it is not safe. When the attacker gets to the front-end service and somehow hacks the front-end service, because those 3 are on the same DMZ server, once the front-end service is hacked, they can access the application service and database without using any kind of logic or service within the application. So they will get the unrestricted access to the database, and we do not want that. And to avoid that, we can increase security a little bit more. And let me talk about this scenario 2 right now. If we split the services into separate servers, let's say database service is on database server, application on app server, and front end on the DMZ server, right? In this scenario, if they hack the front end service, they have to hack the application service separately because they are not on the same server. They are on the same subnet, but not on the same server. And after application service is hacked, they then need to hack the database service as well. It's harder than this in this scenario 1, but it's still possible. And we want to increase the security a little more, so I'm gonna switch to the scenario 3. We now moved out these servers to their own dedicated subnets and firewall zones. For example, front-end service is now on the DMZ server only, within the DMZ subnet and within the DMZ zone. The same applies to the application service being in the app server subnet, app server, and the application zone, and the database is on the DB server, DB subnet, and DB zone. Now, what happens if the attacker hacks the front-end service? First of all, they cannot reach the application server just like that on any of the ports because they have to go through the firewall. Firewall is doing its job. It's restricting the access to ports other than the application service port. And it's going to be much harder to hack the application service if your attack surface is smaller because you have only one open port for the front-end service on the application service. And once they hack the application service, then they need to go and hack the database service, which is again on a completely different zone, different subnet, and different server, and reachable through the firewall only. You can see that this is much harder to hack than what we had on the scenario 1, where we put everything within the one server. We don't want to do that. We want to split them into a separate subnets, servers, and zone. Now let's add more security to this scenario, and that would be scenario 4. Now on the scenario 4, you can see that I have moved the front-end service within the application subnet. It's still on a dedicated server, but it is on the same application subnet as we have the application service. But now on the DMZ server, within the DMZ subnet and DMZ zone, we have reverse proxy service. Now the reverse proxy can filter some of the requests which won't go to the front-end service at all because reverse proxy is blocking it. Even SSL termination is gonna be on the reverse proxy. You can block, for example, the /administrator address so that they cannot get the front-end service admin panel, for example, and things like that. And if they hack the reverse proxy, then they still need to hack the front-end service. From the front-end service, they need to go and hack the application service, and from the application service, they need to go and hack the database service to access everything we have on the database. And all this time, it's through the firewall, except here. And it's much harder than we had on the scenario 1. Now, even in this case, there are attackers from the inside. What if we have compromised computer or compromised IoT device? We don't want to access all these services from the user subnet just like that without any kind of filtering. Let's switch to the scenario 5 and see what we have here. Now, as you can see, I prepared a little bit more zones for the scenario 5. And let me explain what's going on here. The access to the DMZ zone, application zone, and the database zone is allowed only from the management zone. So only this management guy, can access all 3 zones and the servers, nothing else. And we have Jumpbox server, let's say Linux box here, within this management subnet, within the management zone, and only administrators from the user's subnet can access this Jumpbox. IoT cannot access, printer subnet cannot access, only users, and you can even limit based on the IP. Only specific users can access to this Jumpbox server through the multi-factor authentication, through different kind of methods of authentication, and then only this subnet, this Jumpbox server actually can access all 3 subnets. And this is better than scenario 1, as you can see. Because think about it, none of the compromised computer, IoT device, or printer can access the database, application, or the DMZ. They all have to go through the Jumpbox server. And there's so many things you have to do to achieve the access to the reverse proxy or database that it's getting way harder than it was on the scenario 1. And this is the proper way to publish the web service and access the management to these servers within today's cybersecurity requirements. We cannot have scenario 1 in production. It's no good. Nein, no, ara, niet. We cannot have 3 services within the one service and then put them on the edge of the business, on the DMZ. Please don't do that. And if you have questions, put them in the comment. This is all for today. Thanks for watching.